particular pillar for infrastructure are accessible, activity-friendly environments, fit-for-purpose network of facilities, and facility partnerships. The prioritisation section, so the second one down there, from a council perspective, is around the sport investment plan that guides how Auckland Council will invest into sport over the next 20 years. This plan's still in draft form. You approved it for consultation in December, and it's been recently publicly consulted and will be coming back to you as a committee in a couple of months' time for approval. On the sports sector side, there's the Auckland Sports Sector Facilities Priorities Plan. This plan considers evidence behind each development and tests whether or not the project is ready to go and the right preliminary work is in place. So this is the voice of sport. This is sport having got itself organised to say, hey, look, these are the best projects coming from our sector, and it's advice through to us as council and other funders as well. At the investment level, there's the Sport and Recreation Investment Fund, which we're here to discuss today. And on the right-hand side, there's the sector side, which is external funding partners. So this is where we work with our network of funders to, I guess, leverage the investment that we put into projects and to get the best return for Aucklanders from sport facilities as value for money. As I mentioned earlier, the draft plan from our policy team targets a 20-year lifespan and is planned to be adopted this year. It targets investment into 3 key areas: low participant communities, emerging sports with high growth potential, and high participation sports. It's got 4 investment principles: equity, outcome focus, financial sustainability, and accountability. The recommendations we make today have been considered against these themes, and once the plan is confirmed, we'll be coming back to this committee with a robust criteria and process around this fund. The fund itself, there's $5 million available for investment in this financial year. It's followed by $7 million for the next couple of years, and then you'll see it jumps a little bit into the outer years of the LTP, so there's a bit of sort of incremental growth from those 5 years listed there. The fund will help achieve outcomes under the Sport and Recreation Strategic Action Plan, and like I said earlier, leverages investment to achieve that return. So in this year, it's the first year of this fund having been established. Our approach was to support strategically significant projects that maximise the community sport outcomes. They can be successfully delivered in a short period of time. So you'll note that a number of them have got existing funding streams already created, so they just need the last little push to get them across the line. Over 50 projects have been considered, and you should have that broader list sitting in front of you. And our assessment has been against the themes, the philosophy within that sport investment plan, as well as looking at the sports sector facility priorities plan and looking at the assessment criteria within that. Some of these projects have been through the first phase of the formal process there, but for the projects that haven't, we've considered their projects against those same criteria. I'll just add to the previous point that that approach had been workshopped with a subcommittee of councillors, and that councillor group approved that approach. So this leads us into the 8 recommendations that we have for funding this financial year. So the Waitemata Table Tennis Association, the project is to renew and expand the capability and capacity of their facility with $540,000 worth of investment. Three Kings Football Club, which is a clubhouse development to replace an old facility that they had at that site. So the investment is $992,000. Waitakere Regional Hockey Turf Trust, so that completes the final stage of this project, which is a hockey pavilion, which will mean that senior games can now be played there. So a $200,000 investment for that project. The Manukau Taniwha BMX, which is supporting infrastructure including a beginner track and a roof over the start gate, with $203,000 worth of investment. The Mahu Vision Community Trust, who are developing a multi-sport indoor court facility, so we're recommending $785,000 worth of investment for that project. Counties Manukau Off-Road Racing, finishing their track development, so $380,000 worth of investment. Papakura Netball Centre, so outdoor court renewal and rubberisation of the courts at Bruce Pullman Park, so $900,000 of investment for that project. And North Harbour Hockey, as part of a broader development that they're doing at that site, a new turf with $1 million of investment from this fund. So in terms of next steps, following, I guess, resolution from this committee, staff would put in place funding agreements with the recipients. These would be in place by the end of June, which would secure this year's investment towards these sporting outcomes. These funding agreements will have timelines for developments, community access imperatives, and reporting requirements within them. Our staff will also work with the recipients to ensure that they have the right advice as they move into the delivery of the projects. And following that, our council colleagues from policy will bring the final sport investment plan back to you for adoption middle of this year. From that point, we'll be able to seek your agreement on the final criteria for this fund and the contestable process that will subsequently run. This will be accompanied by our timelines for your approval. These criteria and processes will inform our future years of investment from this fund. Thank you.
Fantastic. Right, let's take questions and then we'll have any discussion. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair, and just to the team, thank you. Well done with the work, and I mean, we've got a bit more work to do, and that's the reason for this particular question. For those, and with the list that we have, how much work are we doing with them to ensure, and with funders as well, to ensure that they will be at least preparing themselves to be considered for the next ongoing years with the 10-year plan? So how much work are we doing with them? Because I see in the two early planning stages, there's really not that many from our particular local ward, but I know it's a regional fund. And so for me and my fellow councillors, it's a matter of getting to our local boards to have a look at projects that they have to at least get it ready. So how much work is your team doing to get these, all of them across the region, at a stage where they could be considered, please?
Through you, Chair. Thank you for the question. So our team is doing a substantial amount of work on a number of these projects. The projects are often led from the sport perspective, so they've been identified through code planning processes. So the individual sports codes and collectives of sports codes are prioritising their individual projects and then working with us on where their priorities lie. So our team respond to that and work with the projects to ensure that they're moving through that pipeline of development, and we're going to have a number of projects ready through time to be able to support and be able to grow participation through the supply facilities. You noted the fact that there's a number of projects that are, I guess, listed as being in that preliminary stages. That assessment was made based on the fact that we are coming to you with an interim measure for this first financial year, and that the robust criteria and process will still be coming into future years. So these were made on short-term projects that we could deliver quickly, and there'll be sort of the full process coming at a later stage. So we are working closely with the projects.
I think, Madam Chair, if I may, to just follow up and reinforce what Dave's saying to you, is that it is about building capability and capacity within the sporting sector to be ready to be able to participate in this process and unlock the investment from council and also other funders. So the pipeline that he's describing is building capability and capacity for the sector so they can develop the feasibility and get at the front end of the partnerships policy and investment plan, and then follow that through in a logical order. We have to queue these up in a pipeline, if you like, so that the investment that council's making is matched with other investors and the capacity of the sports sector just to deliver. So I think that has a very good understanding in the sector across the region.
Okay, good. I've got Councillor Clow, Councillor Stewart, Bartley, Walker. Councillor Clow. Casey.
Yeah, again, apologies for being late, but I just want to have a declaration of interest because I'm chairperson of a Class 4 gaming trust that supports a number of these applications. So I just want, it's a declaration, not a conflict. Of all of those up there, one stands out to me. It's a clubhouse development of Three Kings. Now I know I think it's the biggest football club in New Zealand, so I understand that. But all of the others are facilities and infrastructure for associations, etc., whereas that stands out as being an individual club. Can you just comment? Because most other individual clubs have to basically build their own club rooms, or rebuild them, I should say.
Through the chair, you're right that it does stand out as being I guess a clubhouse development. It, like you mentioned, it is a significant facility given the size of that club, with I think close to 2,500 members, and a significant portion of them being young participants. So this is seen as being enabling of participation, whilst it's not a core participation facility. It does really support that and provide that sort of social cohesion around sport participation that we all know is so important and a key outcome area of sport and recreation. Additionally, it's a project that has been around for a number of years, and it's seen that with this investment we can get it across the line and get a really good outcome for a community that's been waiting for a long time for this project.
Oh, look, I'm supportive. Now the other question is, Huapai indoor court facility. That's clearly signalled as it's an ollie. Is that being pushed aside because it's an ollie or whatever? Mr. Sayers might be interested in this. Is it being pushed aside? You know, because we had a meeting yesterday, and that's one of the ollies that why the hell isn't that happening? The courts club, squash club's got a couple of million that's ready to reinvest into it as well, and it just seems one of those ones where we do have willing other partners, but we can't wait too long or they're going to have to rebuild, and therefore that big chunk of money is gone. There's that one, and then what is not here, and maybe there's a reason for it, and I might have the wrong ward, but Kaipatiki is it, with the stand has been pulled down? Is that Birkenhead Memorial? I mean, again, what's happening there? And I think that's their ollie as well. But again, it's all pulled down or chained off or whatever. And where does that sit?
Through you, Madam Chair. So we are watching those ollie projects. My understanding is they're going through a number of them anyway, an indicative business case process. So we, from a sport and recreation standpoint, sort of maintaining visibility across them. We're awaiting the ollie process to roll on through, and then we'll look at opportunities to work with any partners involved in that. I see them as being outside the scope of this fund, for at least for this financial year, until we receive other advice.
But you are keeping an eye on.
We're certainly keeping an eye on those projects, amongst others as well.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
The Stewart.
Oh, thank you for that. I just wonder, how do you actually prioritise which ones actually go through? And with the ones that are too early for planning, I know some of them have actually been in planning for a long, long time, and some of them have actually probably also got other funding from other organisations that are just waiting for something to happen. So those are some questions. And are you going to make sure that you try to make sure that all the wards are looked after, and it's not just going to just one or two or those that have got the loudest voices? Yeah.
Through the chair. So we, in the assessment of these projects, we've used the, I guess, philosophy of the draft sport investment fund plan, to look at the projects through that lens. We've also used the criteria in the Auckland Sports Sector Facilities Priorities Plan to assess the projects. So that's, I guess, the initial lens that we've cast across these at the moment. In terms of the projects sitting in the planning stages, you're right, there's a number of them that have been in that area for a while. one of the hardest stages in the pipeline of development is actually those initial stages where feasibility studies and business cases, they're typically really hard to fund. There's not a lot of funders out there that'll actually contribute towards those particular areas. So we do see a bit of a bottleneck in that space. We're working with our partners to come up with a plan to how to alleviate that and have more projects coming through that pipeline. In regard to the geographic spread across the wards, look, that is something to be considered in terms of where Aucklanders are coming from in terms of their participation, and we see code plans from the sport as being a key way of identifying where the needs are for I guess, development in order to serve the needs of Aucklanders. In saying that, it's not a specific outcome that we're seeking in terms of individual wards. We're looking from that needs basis and to be able to respond based on those criteria that I mentioned earlier.
I'm just sort of thinking about just one that I sort of understand a little bit myself is like the Pakuranga Tennis Club are having to move because it's now on Maori land, so they're having to move, and they were going to be part of the Lord Ellesmore, the gymnastics, you know, which is one of the biggest gymnastics in I think in the country, and you know, I just wondered, because there's a few ticking points that there's clubs that might have to fold or stop for some time, because, you know, are all those sort of things getting put into some sort of a criteria?
Through the chair, absolutely. I guess the immediacy of outcome that's needed is something that is certainly considered through the prioritisation process, especially from that code perspective. So yes, that is wrapped up in the advice that we receive through from the sector about where the priorities for development are.
Just one other thing. Is there a reason why we haven't actually got sort of costings of what some of the proposed codes, you know, how much it's costing? Is there any reason we haven't got those figures in front of us?
Through the chair, in the extended version of that spreadsheet, we do have indicative costings. The reason they're not in the version in front of you is because they're at different stages of planning. So some of the costings are more indicative from our experience across the network, and some are confirmed through, you know, quantity surveyor work. So thought it might be a little bit easy for misinterpretation if we presented those figures as being in a spreadsheet where they look like they're sort of cut and dried. So we can talk to you about specific projects if you would like to understand more about them probably after the meeting, if you like.
So the list that's currently here doesn't necessarily mean the order they're going to be prioritised to walk around. Thank you.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Thank you for the report. I wanted to question the assessment criteria and ask how wise is it to base assessment on a draft sport investment plan, not a final one? And also wanted to ask about how it's based on the facility priorities plan from 2017, which refers to 36 sports in the original 2009 Greater Auckland Regional Sport Facility Strategy, and seeing that that is a 10-year-old strategy, whether it's outdated in order for these projects to be assessed against.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for the question. In regard to the assessment and basing it on a draft council investment plan, it is, I guess, the best guidance that we have at this stage. It has been passed this committee and been approved for consultation. Having been involved in a number of the consultation sessions, the support from the sports sector and from the wider community was generally really positive around that plan. So look, I think we are unlikely, pending the policy work to go into that, to see any significant changes to that plan when it comes for final approval from this committee. We wanted to be able to, I guess, express the council view that's been wrapped up in a significant process over a number of years developing that draft investment plan through the work that we're doing here. And given that it's not finalised, we used it as a piece of advice that was considered in the assessment of these projects. In regard to your question around the Auckland Sports Sector Facilities Priorities Plan that was finalised in 2017, that piece of work did involve a very large number of sports organisations. From memory, it was around 80 organisations were involved in the consultation around that plan. I do believe that it represents a good representation across the sports sector of organisations, in saying that through time I'm sure we will see new organisations come into existence, and we will be working with those organisations to make sure that we're feeding them into this process, we understand what their needs are, and we can work with them through time. And you'll note from the council document, the sport investment plan, that it recognises the importance of emerging sports with high growth potential. So that's a lens that we look at those sort of sports that may be newer to the table.
Bartley, that's actually the heart of the issue, so thank you for the really perceptive question. Councillor Walker.
Got a few questions. The first one I think was alluded to by Sharon Stewart. So what's the relationship between this list here and the process that we're dealing with in the agenda?
Through the chair, thanks for the question. The long list is a list of projects that our team within council are considering and working on, keeping visibility across to track their movement through the development process to ensure that we have the pipeline of projects coming through. So I guess that was the wider list of projects that were considered in terms of the coming up with the recommendations for the projects.
So I've got a couple of specific questions, and one is just around the approach. So I'm looking, for example, at the Albany Tennis Centre redevelopment. I'm very well familiar with that centre, and I can see that we're saying too early planning stages. However, I note that in the commentary it states assets failing. So there are some specific assets in that building that need some attention now. Yes, you might put off something much bigger on the basis of planning stages, but it would be really great to have the release of some funding to fix up some stuff that is not necessarily expensive, has to be done anyway, rather than conceivably putting them off, because it's rather an embarrassment, and I'd suggest that some of the issues there go to health and safety. So I just put that to you. Is it possible to have a part release of some funds in instances where it needs to happen?
Through you, Madam Chair. Conceivably, that is something we could look at. That particular facility is, there's work going on at the moment to look at options around that. So there's some consultant work being funded by that trust that oversees that facility to look at what the future is for it. That is, I guess, why we're saying too early planning stages for that particular one. I note your concerns around the health and safety at that facility, and we would need to see advice about the actual situation there, about whether or not that's a risk.
So just coming back to my question, is it possible to have a release of some very modest funds in instances where there's some urgency? Does that need to come back to us?
I think, Madam Chair, that's something we can report to you on future years of a responsive fund. We haven't received any application from Albany Tennis for that purpose right now, but we'll follow up and report back to Councillor Walker and perhaps Councillor Watson about what may be required there, and we can report back on a potential response.
I think that would be
funding.
a good
Okay, so that's
practical discussion.
It's the other question I've got just goes to a number of items where the project name is Colindale Park, and it notes, I won't go through all of them, it recommended funding in this round and so on. Are those items, or some of those items, part of the 8.9 million that we approved?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, the recommendations in this paper are for works to leased areas for community sport outcomes, so community leases. So the organisations are, I guess, working on their own asset at that site. The broader conversation around the landowner works at Colindale Park is a separate conversation to funding the individual organisations at the site.
Okay, the other question I've got just goes to our ability to assess a number of these projects, and I'll give you a couple of examples. A number of projects that fit within motorsport, and then there's at least one category here that fits under snow sport or ice sport or the like. I don't know how we categorise that. And we don't have CODA activity plans across a number of areas. We don't have an activity plan for motorsport across Auckland. I don't know that we've got anything for snow sport or ice sport or the like. So how do we go about prioritising those plans so that we've got an idea of investment and particularly opportunities for collaboration and so on, and getting things right?
Can I suggest, Councillor, I think that's a really good question, and we've raised around this table the need to have an urgent plan for motorsport on a regional level, but I think that's not for this discussion today, but I would very much like to wrap that into the wider sports sector discussion when it comes back to us next month after.
Through you, Madam Chair.
I think it's an important discussion to have.
The reason that I am raising it is that in the executive summary and in the report there are other contextual items, for example the Auckland Sports Sector Facilities Priorities Plan, the Draft Sport Investment Plan, and I'm in total agreement with those. What I'm identifying and suggesting is that there are other contextual items that could inform this, and it would be useful to have them in the commentary so that the councillors and the wider public, particularly the sporting public, looking at this, have that overall context.
Totally agreeing with you, Councillor, and I think the subset of code plans we can certainly have available to us when our wider sports sector plan comes back to us.
And the other plan that's useful is, of course, the venue development strategy, which goes to high performance sport and other things, so I just toss that in as well.
Yep. No, cool, completely agree. Councillor Casey.
I've got 3 comments. One's good, one's bad, and one's ugly. So I'll do the good one first. Delighted, absolutely delighted to see that at last Three Kings United have got their new clubhouse, changing rooms and public toilets. And for as long as I've been on even the Auckland City Council, that's been coming, I think, since the very early, like for the last, 18 years at least. To answer Councillor Cole's question, the clubhouse will be available and has been available to local schools. It's an activity centre for the whole park, and the public toilets will just be fantastic for the locals to have something new. So that is absolutely amazing. It's one of the biggest football clubs. I say football, I mean soccer. Football clubs in New Zealand, and they've got 2,400 members, and like 1,900 of them are under 18, so it's a real community hub. It's also in the most diverse area of Auckland, and football is a great leveller. Look at our World Cup soccer that we had at the International Cultural Festival. Fantastic facility, so great news. The bad news is there's another football club in Albert Eden Ward, which is just under that line there, and I know that the local board are really disappointed it hasn't made the cut this time. And that's Metro. Can you say anything about the timeline around that? Must be very close to getting funding, because again, I think everybody expected it would be funded, and the disappointment is such that it would be nice to be able to tell them that it's coming up in the next round.
Through you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, I don't have the detail on that particular project sitting in front of me. That might be something we can come back to you following the meeting.
I'd very much like to just get a handle on when we could expect that work to take place. I'm assuming it will be in the next year.
In terms of those future year allocations, we are still to come back to you with the criteria and process around the decision making for that before we can make any provide any advice about the following year's investment. So that's a decision that's still to come.
I understand that there's only 4 projects that have just missed the line. There's 4 of them that says funding shortfall too great at this time, just 4, and that's one of those. So I'm assuming it's kind of nearly there, right? Nearly there. And ugly. I was reading in the paper about the Avondale Bowling Club, and I see that you've got a line item that says Auckland Bowls is leveraging sale of some sites, and I wondered if you could just elucidate on the process for sale, and that we don't own it. We do own some of the bowling clubs. Could you talk about the Avondale Bowling Club just for like 2 minutes so that everybody knows what happened there? It's in court at the moment.
Through you, Madam Chair, without being having the detail in front of me on Avondale Bowling Club, my understanding is that facility was privately owned by the club. And there was a sale of part of that asset.
I guess, just to be fair for the staff, and I should have, when we started the item, just to keep a little bit of control over this, it's the top bit is what we're here to talk about. Our staff are not, they don't have the information in front of them, and the long list is there for our interest, but not at the moment our discussion. So I just ask councillors to perhaps go to the staff directly with extra information that you need. And just in defence of the process, we said this was as good as it was as good as it can be for the moment. In the next couple of months, we will actually have the whole watertight process with all of the criteria, the contestability, everything else attached to it for our discussion. But at the moment, we need to get the funding across the line because we will run out of financial year time. So, you know, let's get as close to perfect as we can. I've got Councillor Newman, Fletcher, Sayers and Cooper. Councillor Newman. Okay, should we just whip our way through the questions? Councillor Fletcher?
Well, thank you, officers. One of the challenges of amalgamation was always going to be looking at the funding and the equity around these. So I understand the work and the targeted approach and the investment guidelines that you've put forward, and I thank the Chair for this work that has been undertaken. To a degree, Councillor Casey has taken a comment that I had, but I want to bring it back to a question following Councillor Clow. Can you confirm that there has been 7 years of work that has been put into this application by Three Kings, and that there is some nearly $2.5 million that will be made available through partnership funding on this project? My understanding is that Foundation North Lotteries, New Zealand Community Trust, Milestone Foundation and the Four Winds Foundation have committed.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that's correct. There has been, I guess, a long process that this particular development's been through, and council staff have been working with them for a number of years. And you're correct that there is very substantive partnership funding that is coming into this project that the council funding is, I guess, supporting and leveraged against.
Thank you. And can you further confirm that the pavilion and clubhouse facilities will serve all park users, community groups and the local schools?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, there will be a community access agreement that we have as part of our funding agreement that we'll be putting in place that will secure the use of that facility for other community groups alongside the club itself.
And lastly, can you confirm that the project is ready to go, the engineering work, the consenting issues and all of those? So this is really the very last stage. This will see the council allowing completion of this project.
Through the Chair, yes, that's correct. This will allow the project to proceed into delivery.
Thank you for the disciplined way in which you've gone about the assessment of this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just I want to acknowledge and congratulate you on whittling down the list from 70 down to the number that you've approved. You know, that's a big effort and well done, and I congratulate you on that. So I've just got, look, two quick questions. First one's around the next round. So just confirming, it'll go and it'll be more contestable, and the local boards will have input into that process, and perhaps local board services. That's probably the primary essence of my question, because I'm thinking of things like, you know, every council will have similar things in their regions. Like we've got the Mahu Sports Collective up there at the AMP Showgrounds, which you're probably familiar with. So they'll probably, the local board may well want to get behind that group in terms of lobbying and supporting those applications. So that's just question number one. And question number two, and I thank Councillor Clove for raising about the Ollies, Councillor, and because it's probably of interest to all councillors in terms of moving forward as well, in terms of their ability to enter that contestable process for Ollie projects. I'm not quite sure if they're in or out next time round. Thank you.
Through the Chair, firstly in regard to your second question actually, around the Ollie process, so that'll be part, the next phase of this is developing the criteria and process. So I probably can't speak to whether or not Ollies will be in scope or out of scope of this project. However, there will be a process that we'll be going through to come back to you for advice around what that criteria and process will be for future years. In regard to that process as well, you speak about the local board engagement. With a contestable process, I would suggest that there will be real value in local boards supporting applications into the fund for projects that are happening within their local area. So there should be the opportunity for that local board voice to come through in terms of those contestable projects.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you to the staff for good work, and I do want to acknowledge the staff for the challenge around the governance and development of the master plan at Bruce Pullman Park, and say to you, Chair, that I'll have to meet with the trustees again shortly. There are some really difficult and quite intractable issues around the roles and responsibilities of different people and agencies in relation to Bruce Pullman Park, and this funding today is really, really helpful, but hand in hand with that will be a need to settle ultimately who is responsible for renewals of sports facilities. And so I want to thank Sharon and Mace in particular, but I do look forward to them coming with me as we continue that discussion, because it will be needed. Because ultimately, Chair, I think that the project to complete rubberisation is probably more in the vicinity of $3 million, and this is an amazing first step, but it is going to require a change in approach at Pullman Park to deliver an asset that is fit for purpose and which can be renewed, meeting the needs of the community, with the council playing an important role in that. So I want to thank the officers for their work and say that it's very, very helpful, and that we will need to continue the conversation with the trustees, who I think are in a better space now than they might have been, say, 18 months ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Mine was comments. I think the process has been really good, and we do only have $5 million this round, and I do have an interest as well as being a recommender to the Trust Community Foundation, but also then the opportunity to have been on the sport funders working group, and having that involvement of Sport New Zealand, Active, and people who understand what the code plans are all over the country, which all of the clubs, etc., the different sports and recreation adhere to. And so I think that's helped us to understand that we're not just doing this in the dark, we're actually helping follow strategies right across the region and the country, and so that we are doing the right thing. It's not random, and then we don't find out later, oh, we shouldn't have done that because that doesn't align. So I think that's been a really good process. And clearly, I mean, I think we've got to, based on the criteria of need and readiness, you've got some really good projects here. And one of the things is also being out in the community, you see these projects, and but for council, just getting us across the line, getting them across the line actually supports a lot of people in the community that do this involuntary. They don't often have the expertise unless they're very lucky that one of their members, you know, has some sort of expertise. And I think the rigour and professionalism that you've been able to bring to this process makes it really robust. And it does support that. I mean, I've seen some of these struggling for 10, 15 years, and they've actually just needed someone to pull it all together and give them that guidance, and then that last bit of money that we can help with does make a difference. And for all of these, they've all gone to get money from other places. So they've done the hard yards, and it's so distressing to see when communities do that work and then it falls over. So this will actually support the work they've done over the years, but also give it the rigour that we need in spending ratepayers' money. So I'm very, I want to thank you for that. I think also just the fact that it brings a real scrutiny to this, so we can be confident that when we vote for this money, it's going to happen, and it's going to be, people are going to be held accountable, and I think that's really important for the public to understand. But otherwise, I think it's been a good process. The other thing, I really appreciate this chart here. So for all of us across the region, we can see often projects that might be in our ward, and we can understand where it's at. And I think that's important, because often you go, wonder what happened to that. But now I've marked it up, you know, I can see, and then I can, you know, I know that it's on the list somewhere. And when people come to me in the community, I can say, this is where it is, and what support do you need? So thank you very much for the work, and I really commend the project.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Watson.
Thanks. Just a couple of brief comments that kind of reflect what some of the other people have been saying. I guess the thing that stands out to me, you know, aside from the projects that we're giving approval today, which in many instances result in the council contributing up to a third to a half of the cost of the project, I would suggest that in the future, you know, the ability to get this other funding will be, you know, increasingly difficult. If we look at our projects as a whole, you know, we have 87 sports projects, 8 getting funded in this round, 16 are funded all round. On the face of it, $120 million over 10 years, you know, seems like a big sum, but obviously it's not, and it will go, you know, it will go very quickly. So there's a huge challenge for our officers here in meeting these demands that are going to only get harder, and as everyone's quoting from around their wards, there's projects here that have been, I would suggest with all due respect, in the planning stage for a long while, and quite significant sums of money in some instances have been devoted by the entities to, you know, to get plans drawn up and all the rest of it. I mean, big sums of money. So yeah, great. You know, these are the things that really provide benefits to our communities. That the only point I would make is that we know it's a constrained funding environment. We know $120 million won't come anywhere near to catering for you know, the lion's share of these, and we know that new ones are going to come into the fold over the period of a decade. So for me, that makes the allocation of funding overall related to sport all that much more valuable. Every penny should count, and any projects, particularly big projects that take out big chunks of money and that run the risk of continual overrun or blowout, as the term's used, that we've seen quite a bit, they should be really held up in scrutiny in comparison to these ones. For me, these are the ones that matter, that bring benefit to all our communities. So I hope over the budget round that we all remember this, as I'm sure we will, and put the same slide rule over the big stuff that we do, that the officers do so thoroughly for the community-based projects. Thank you.
So thank you. My comment is to thank staff for the work that they do. From my perspective, my ward isn't part of the funding round here, but it was before. So I'm going to give you a huge round of applause from an organisation that has been funded before, the scrutiny that went around that. And it was a long, slow, detailed scrutiny, which can be frustrating from politically, but I have very much confidence in what you as a team are doing as a result of that. So I want to thank you very much. The other comment I want to say is, and I know it's regional and you try and put the lens over, but 16 out of the 21 local boards have got a project out of this fund too, and that's I know that they're all benefit from a regional perspective, but that is a really good message too that we're giving, that you are trying to spread the love when there's conflicts around that, especially when we come into the second stage of the process in the cycle that we're in. So I do congratulate you on that. I also, Madam Chair, and I don't know where my Chair of Finance has gone, but I do take on Councillor Watson's issue around funding. And I think this is grassroots council business. This is stuff that makes, the health of our people out there in the community, makes a difference to those people. So I suppose the only concerning thing is how long the list is. And I'm certainly going to be very conscious of that coming, probably more LTP time, but certainly in the first instance around annual plan. So congratulations and thank you, and let's see if we can find this fund some more money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have to say some of us lobbied pretty hard for the 120 mil to go into the LTP, and the Mayor put it in his proposal. For those of you who will be around the table next year for the LTP, it's in your hands to spend money in this area and make sure that it gets in. Councillor Filipaina.
Chair, you've taken exactly what I wanted to say. Also, Chair, look, I just wanted to pick up on a few things that Councillor Watson said, and that was about the third and half of what the council funding for some of these projects. And I agree with Councillor Watson in regards to now having the ability to do that, to get these projects over the line for our community. And I mean, there was a question asked earlier around our community and how much access we are going to have with them. Well, we are going to have access to these facilities, and that's as a result of the 120 million in the long-term plan. So, Mace, to you, to your team, Dave, Sharon, to the whole lot of you, thank you so much. And I'm just going to echo again the comments that have been made for you. For the councillors that have been around this table since 2010, and in 2011 especially, seeing this and the work that this committee does, is I think is a very good example, because it's going out to our community saying that here are the projects that we are going to assist to get them over the line for our community. Here is the criteria. I looked forward to the criteria of the next allocation of monies. But, I mentioned before that it's important that any of the projects that are beneficial to our community and the accountability of that monies need to be put out. This is going to be put out. Chair, we've put out the targeted rate for the water, the targeted rate for the environment. So we're pushing those out, saying to our ratepayers, this is where your money's going. So congratulations for this. And my last comment is Mason and Dave, especially around the question I asked around the assistance that your team will be giving those that need to get over the line. I think that's important. That is so, so important. I mean, Councillor Casey mentioned her one in her ward. You know, I mean, but it is important getting them over the line, whether it be with the business case and any assistance with that, whether it's talking to our funders and getting them to support, especially if there is a commitment from council to put some funding into this particular project and it allows them to get that funding. Look, that's just going to be beneficial for our community. So, look, congratulations and thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Another question, and that's around development contributions. I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that we've got provision here that's around improvements to park space and so on. And my understanding is that improvements to parks and reserves can be included in development contributions. Correct me if I'm wrong there. If that is the case, and we've got quite obviously substantial investment in areas where we've got big increases in population, I could go into that. Have we got these projects in our project lists that inform our development contributions funding?
Madam Chair, so there is coordination. There is coordination across community facilities and how we're achieving that. I think this afternoon's workshop, Councillor Walker, you'll be able to see the opportunities and challenges for development contributions and providing for parks.
So is that a yes?
That's a yes, Councillor Walker.
Okay, all good.
So that's a good advertisement for this afternoon's workshop, which we will bring forward. I think we're bringing it forward because this meeting will finish a bit earlier than we thought, so starting immediately after lunch. I just wish, alongside Councillor Cooper and Councillor Clow, I also have an interest, being a licensing trust member and recommending funding for various sports bodies in the Auckland region. It's not a conflict. I just need to note the interest and to echo the congratulations for this good work to the staff. So thank you very much. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.